Hello and welcome to the Super Centex High School Football Friday Night Multimedia Podcast. I'm Chad Connally, along with Trib Sports Editor Bryce Cherry. We're back again for another installment of the show as we begin to understand the rhythm of high school football here during this pandemic. Bryce, if someone...
Wait. First I gotta interrupt.
Okay.
How long is this name of this podcast going to be by the end of the season?
Hopefully, you know, by the time we get to the end of the season, I can finish saying the name of the podcast, and we'll be well into minute 7.
Okay. I believe it's the hashtag Trib Friday Night.
Trib Friday Night
podcast.
So then it'll be the Trib Friday Night Super Centex High School Football Multimedia Podcast, featuring Chad Connally and Bryce Cherry.
Plus, if we get a sponsor.
Right.
Then we have that on top.
I have some sponsorship ideas as we'll find out later in the podcast today.
Okay.
Having said all of that, like I said, I think we're getting used to the rhythm of football in the pandemic, you know, kind of keeping an eye on things and seeing what's going to get canceled and haven't had maybe 10%, 5% cancellations at this point, but if someone were to wake up from like a 6-month coma today and you had to describe to them where we're at as far as high school football in 2020, how would you describe it to them?
Well, Chad, it's funny that you mentioned that. I'm going to go, didn't last week I called my analogy a very Chad-esque analogy?
Yeah,
so I want you to buckle up, just bear with me on this analogy because we're going to get there, but it's going to take a little explaining.
Okay.
So during the pandemic, my family has gotten a puppy, as you know. The puppy, Tootsie, is having her spayed today. She's getting spayed.
I don't like where this is going.
Just stay with me. Hang on. So it's major surgery. They go under anesthesia. You know, they give us a little thing of post-operative instructions and stuff.
By the way, this puppy is running the show at your house.
Oh, yeah. It's a puppy.
Yeah.
And one of the things it said on there was that, look, your pet had major surgery. It's going to be groggy. There's certain everyday normal things are... you know, may seem a little strange to them. They're going to be a little fuzzy. And where I'm going with all that is, if you woke up from a 6-month coma in 2020 football season, it would look a little different. I mean, and it would be football.
You would be fuzzy from the coma and fuzzy from the way things are going on.
Right, exactly. And basically, things are not necessarily as they seem. You know, to me... in the COVID era, just completing a game is a victory. And I've heard coaches even say that, you know, coaches who have won, coaches who have lost. You know, I think a completed practice, getting through another week is a victory. I think we're celebrating smaller things in 2020.
Right.
And, you know, I think in the grand scheme of things, it gives us a good perspective on things, you know, that, you know, maybe we took high school football for granted a little bit before. But certainly, you know, I think a fan that had just walked into a lot of these games would be like, where's all the fans, you know? I mean, that would be probably the strangest thing, I think.
Yeah, whereas some of the people that have been going through the pandemic go to the football game and they go, oh, they're not social distancing at the football game.
Right. Yes, the mask shaming. We don't want to do that.
Anyway, now that I've done that, let's move on. It's time for the regular feature of this year's podcast, the pound for pound rankings.
Yes.
You gave us your initial rankings last week, and then we had a full slate of games. We had 2 ranked teams playing each other in Vega and Connally. So what do you got for us this week?
So my rankings are a little shaken up this week. I have one team that fell out of my top 5, and that would be Cameron Yo. The Yeomen played Belleville.
And got their bell rung.
Yeah, exactly. And Belleville's a Class 4A team. And I was talking with Tommy Brashear actually today, And he goes, I don't know how that running back doesn't have any offers.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was like, he's legit. He's the real deal. And he had like 6 or 7 touchdowns against Cameron Yo. So the Yeomen obviously have some work to do defensively. I still think they're going to be pretty good. And they still, it was 54-41.
Right.
So they still scored plenty of points. And so I think the Yeomen might make it back into the power poll, or the pound for pound rankings, whatever we're calling it. But the team that I have moved in is China Spring.
Right. I mean, they moved into the state rankings this week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're 2-0, 2 good wins. Emmanuel Abdallah's running the ball well. I think their defense is pretty good. So they would be my number 5 team. My number 5 team last week, I don't know if you remember my rankings, was actually Connally. I have moved Connally up to 4 with a loss. And that just goes to the fact that they played La Vega really, really tough.
Yeah.
And in talking with Shane Anderson today, he was saying as much and saying that that's the message he's telling his team. Look, we went toe-to-toe with the number 1 team in 4A Division I. And he even paid it forward a little bit and said that, we may get that chance again, essentially against a top-ranked team in Carthage later on in the year, in the playoffs. And he said, we've got to be better. We got to be more prepared. We got to be ready. So he thinks this game with La Vega will have lasting benefits, and that's why you play a game like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at as recently as 2017, last time they played, and La Vega kicked their butts 42-2, and then you go and you play in 13-10. Big step forward. Big
step forward.
Yeah.
My top 3 all stay the same, and that's Jonesboro. Jonesboro's continuing to roll on. They're 2-0. 2 is La Vega. I think the gap between La Vega and Mart in these pound-for-pound rankings may have gotten a little smaller. I mean, I have Mart there because they're Mart. And they're, they're going for 4 in a row. They haven't shown anything that would disprove that they're the best pound-for-pound team.
Well,
but La Vega, I mean, it is interesting that we're going into week 3 now. And La Vega will be playing its 3rd top 10 ranked team in 3 weeks.
Cal Allen.
Yeah. And they haven't even played Argyle yet.
Right.
I mean, they're backing down from nobody.
Right, and even with the shuffled schedule, that's what you see with them. And I think maybe we've reached a point where it's part of the culture in Texas for these big time teams to play each other constantly. That was a little bit for free. That wasn't on the script this week.
That's all right.
So I'm working on a story for Friday on local coaches who are in their 2nd seasons at their schools. Among them are a few candidates for surprise team of 2020. Who fits that description in your eyes? And I'll throw a couple out there. We got, of course, Riesel is 2-0 under Coach Keith Stiffelmeyer. And then Groesbeck is 2-0 under Jerry Bomar. And that was a team that just wasn't very good last year, and they won a couple of games. But there you go.
You stole my answer. I mean, it's Groesbeck.
Yeah.
I think, as you said, the Goats in last year in Coach Bomar's first season, and this is actually his 2nd time around in Groesbeck, so it's not like he's, unfamiliar with either the town or coaching in general. But they were 2-8, and their only wins were against Marlin, and that was a pretty close game. It was kind of a squeaker. And Eustis was the other team Groesbeck beaten in 2019. Now they're 2-0. They've already matched last year's win total. And it's not just that they're 2-0, but kind of how they've done it. 2 pretty convincing wins over Mildred and Rice. And, Goats are looking good. So, to me, they're kind of the surprise team. And it'll be interesting to see, how the rest of the season plays out for them.
Yeah, when I talked to him in preseason, of course, he's an air raid guy. I remember watching them play with that offense when he was at Grand Prairie back in the early 2000s. His son, Rhett Bomar, was quarterback there at the time. And so he's been using that air raid, spread offense for a long time. And you can see it starting to crank up, and And one thing he says, he had big receivers and some guys that kind of fit what they wanted to do. Even though they had, had a 2-8 season last year, and he said it was still a part of a building process. That building is going up pretty fast at the moment. So.
Yeah, and another team, I do think that idea of second-year coaches is kind of interesting, because I think that first year is always a little bit of a transition. You're getting to know the kids, you're installing your system, all that. It's hard to come in and have just instant success.
Right.
There's always seems to be a few bumps along the way. That second year, I think, everybody's a little more familiar with each other, a little more comfortable. And, we're seeing that in Riesel, we're seeing that in Groesbeck. Hillsborough is another one that's off to a good start. That Steve Hale is a Hillsborough guy and in his second year.
Right.
So.
Now, the flip side of that is Bruce Valetti, which the results don't match what we're talking about, but I think the attitude does. And I'm going to put in the story sort of what I saw from them during the first half when they played Crawford off their feet in the first and second quarter. And I'll make people wait and read the story, but there is a little bit of an element of that you can see trust building among a team and a program there. So
yeah, and another team that you and I have talked about in that same realm with a second-year head coach is McGregor.
Yeah.
Lost to a 4A Lake Worth team the first week, and then last week took on Mart and, played Mart tough. I mean, obviously Mart is Mart, and they're going to give you a game. But I think McGregor, even at 0-2, seems to be trending in the right direction, if that makes sense. I mean, I think, you talk to these coaches, and one thing they always say is obviously they want to try to win a game, but they want to get better, week to week. And I'm not so sure that McGregor's not doing that. I think that they are getting better.
No, I think McGregor has, a pretty good team. Unfortunately, they could have a pretty good team and go 3-7 this year.
It could. It's a really tough district.
Yeah.
But obviously, these early games don't count toward that. So,
right.
If they can get better and, they could be a player in that district.
Right. Finally, the game of the week on the TV broadcast to be broadcast by KWTX on the CW, and this is where the sponsorship came.
Yeah, we need to call these guys. We need to call, Tyler over there at KWTX and, figure out how to get some money
some
out of
sponsorship dollars for the podcast, and that way we can add another couple of words to the podcast title as well.
Sure.
So, it's Troy at Robinson, and that's going to give Central Texas fans an opportunity to sit on their couch on Friday night, eat a pizza, and watch Troy star Zach Herbachik.
Right.
We always say that different.
I say Herbachik.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if we're saying it right. We know how to spell it.
Well, you remember Kent Herbeck for the Twins?
Yeah.
So I just try to use Kent Herbeck and Kent Herbachik. Yeah. Anyway, he's a great running back for them. You got to see him in the playoffs last year in a fantastic game against Whitney. And so that got me to thinking, name one player you've seen going all back in all your years, way back to the 60s. And tell me one player you've seen on the high school level that you think would make for good TV viewing.
So I wrote down more than one because I can't just limit it to one. I will say back to Herbachik for a second. He's not my answer, although he's worth watching for sure. But I did notice that our freelancer, Zach Burke, who covered the Troy Mejia game for us last week, had a tweet that said, of all the running backs I've seen at the high school level, Zach Herbachik maybe the best I've ever seen. I thought that was high praise, so he's the real deal. He's fun to watch.
Right.
The three that I mentioned are all Central Texas guys. There's others I could think of, but Rashad Paul, obviously the great Bremont quarterback who had such an incredible run there, three straight state championships. His record in high school was just, incredible. But what made him so special, again, is the way he did it and just how dynamic in the open field he was. And I'll never forget watching on TV. I think Jason Orts may have been covering that game for us. It was a state game against, who was it against? I can't remember. but he did like a Madden type spin move, in the open field, and it was just ridiculous. And then Quan Cosby from Mart, is another guy that just dominated on both sides of the ball.
Right.
And
that was pretty early in your Trib career.
Yeah, I did see him play, and he was just a playmaker. I mean, and then kind of maybe a little bit of a forgotten guy, I think, underrated in hindsight. But he was really fun to watch in high school. Was Robert Johnson, the Waco High quarterback.
Yeah.
He was extremely athletic, could really throw the ball, but also could run. And I'll never forget a triple overtime game against A&M Consolidated. He was rolling left and threw across his body back to the right and threw it on a rope to his receiver. I mean, it was just like, dude. I mean, he was fun to watch. And like I said, there's others that, I could think of, but those three, the ones that immediately popped to mind.
Sure. I always have the same answer on this type of a question. And I feel bad continually going back to it, but I think maybe it means that it's like my real answer. But when I was going to college at Texas Tech and I was covering games on Friday nights, several times I got to cover Andrews when Shad Williams played there. And Shad Williams was a man among boys more so than I've seen. And he was running back, big, strong, could go up the middle, but he also could get the corner and be gone in a heartbeat on you. And
his numbers in high school were off the charts. I can't remember how much he rushed for.
Well, I guarantee you he ran for over 250 yards every time I saw him play.
Wow.
And of course he played at Tech, Spike Dykes' last year, and then he transferred to Alabama. And then he played for the Bills and maybe a couple of NFL teams. But he's also like the quickest player I ever covered to get in the High School Football Hall of Fame. So yeah, so that was, obviously it was pretty special. And I was just a kid. I didn't even know any better. And I was like, wow, boy, this guy's great.
Yeah.
So,
well, a couple others I'll just throw in there because I've mentioned this guy a bunch. And I feel like you sometimes or maybe I feel like a broken record. Jordan Parkis from Rosebud Live. He was just unreal. One of the best high school football players I've ever seen. Didn't end up playing in college. Didn't really get a ton of recruiting interest until really, really late in the process. But I think he went to A&M just as a student. But he was amazing, and they won state his senior year. I'll never forget, he had an interception return that was like 108 yards in the state semifinals against Rogers at Waco ISD. I mean, caught it on the last play of the first half in the back of the end zone and weaved his way all the way down the field to score. That was amazing. That play like lives on in my brain and probably has a lot to do with why I think he's so great. But and then the other guy I was going to mention that's not a Central Texas guy, but in my previous incarnation as a sports writer, I was in Brenham, my hometown, and Brenham was in a district for a while with New Caney, and New Caney had a guy by the name of Adam Dunn. Adam Dunn went and played baseball for many, many years. 400 home runs, I think.
Oh wow!
Yeah, ended up being a big hulking guy. Played for the Reds and the White Sox, but in high school he was much slimmer. He was still a big guy. He was like 6'5", but he played football, basketball, and baseball, and did them all well.
Yeah.
And I always thought, honestly, like I saw him play all three of those sports in high school because Brenham played them in every sport. But I always thought football was his best sport. He was their quarterback and was really, really good. And actually, Texas had offered him a scholarship, and I think he had committed, but he ended up going to the major.
Going too high in the draft.
Right, going to baseball, and avoided getting tackled all those years.
Well, that leads to my column that's running tomorrow is about how Patrick Mahomes didn't go high enough in the draft. He went in 37th round, but I think he had already kind of made up his mind to take a shot at football.
Yeah, Kyler Murray is another one that flirted with baseball. So.
Absolutely.
some pretty good athletes that we have just mentioned.
Yep. Well, I guess that'll do it. We didn't come up with much of an end game, but
Well, you'll be at the Troy Robinson game.
I'll be at the Troy Robinson game.
So you'll get to see Herbachic in person.
I will, unless, well, yeah.
Unless it gets called off.
It is on TV. You know, there are worse things than drinking beer on your couch and watching the game,
Thank
boss.
you.